Hey, it's Kyle here, and today I'll be taking a look back at my favorite fiction books that I read in 2020. I should make clear, if you're wondering, I'm not saying these books were necessarily published in 2020, although some of them were. I'm just saying I read the books in 2020. I'm also doing a separate video for my favorite non-fiction books that I read in 2020, so keep an eye out for that. So that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. Number 5 on my list of favorite fiction books I read in 2020 is Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. Some of y'all might be familiar with the name Veronica Roth, even if you haven't read anything before. She's somewhat well known for being the author of the Divergent series, a really popular YA series that kind of came out around the same time, a little bit after the Hunger Games, as part of the big YA movie adaptation craze. So some people maybe have seen Divergent, the movie, and haven't read the book. But I really enjoy Veronica Roth's writing styles. Read all the books in the Divergent series, the series she did after that, and then this is her newest book, Chosen Ones, that did come out in 2020. It's kind of an interesting look at a world where magic is kind of bleeding into the world. It wasn't really a thing, and then a mysterious event happened, and suddenly people start gaining magical abilities, and there's a big bad villain, like there usually is in a lot of these stories, and a group of chosen ones, youngsters who have a special talent in the magical realm, are selected to kind of fight this chosen one. The thing I really enjoyed about this book is the book is in some ways about the abilities, like a lot of times it is with these types of storylines, but it's almost taking a look at this genre from a wider view and kind of figuring out, like, alright, why were these people selected? Is it really good they were selected? How does it impact their life? How does it impact their mental health? This book deals a lot with post-traumatic stress disorder, which I found very interesting for these young people who are basically thrown into these horrendous situations. A lot of times they're impacted the same way that you would think of like soldiers in our world. And a lot of times books like this kind of gloss over that, so that was kind of interesting. It also takes a look about the big bad and, examines that viewpoint in a kind of a unique manner that a lot of books in this type of genre usually don't. So if you enjoy the kind of the YA genre, if you enjoyed stuff like the Hunger Games or Divergent, I would say check out Chosen Ones. It's a very interesting book by Veronica Roth. Really enjoyed it. She's a great author. It's very well written and very interesting. Number 4 on my list is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne. It's kind of ironic this comes right after The Chosen Ones, because it's another book. The YA genre. Suzanne Collins is very, very famous for being the author of the Hunger Games series. I absolutely love the Hunger Games books. Movies were great as well. I have a personal connection to it. I was actually an extra in the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. I was a citizen of District 13, so that's my claim to fame in the Hunger Games universe. But if you're not familiar with this book, which also came out in 2020, is a prequel to the Hunger Games, and it kind of gives the background of the character President Snow and what his kind of teenage years were like and what started him on his rise to power to the position of president that we see in the Hunger Games series. Very interesting book. I would love a lot more books in the Hunger Games world and kind of exploring the society and different characters. The storyline of this book was very interesting. The one part of the book I didn't enjoy was the fact that the book was centered around Snow. Now, in this book, he's not a villain yet, like he is in the movies, but you have this connection to him from the Hunger Games books. And so he's going to end up being a villain. So in the book, you're supposed to be kind of rooting for him, but at the same time, this guy turns into such an absolute villain. I'm just not invested in him in that way. So I think this book would have been a lot better if they picked another character to kind of be the main focus. And maybe Snow could have been involved, but maybe more just a secondary character. That is the only complaint I had about the story. Otherwise, the storyline's very interesting. The one thing when I read this book, it's been a while since I read the Hunger Games books, I instantly remember, oh yeah, Suzanne Collins, just to say, is an extremely talented author. You forgot how well written the Hunger Games books were until I read this, and I was like, oh yeah, that's one reason the Hunger Games were so excellent. She was such a talented author. So looking forward to more books in the Hunger Games world, just hopefully not with Snow being a main character. So Number 3 is a Star Wars book, Canto Bight. It's written by 4 different authors. This book was very different than most Star Wars books because it's more of a collection of short stories instead of one overall story arc. But it's all set on the planet of Canto Bight, or I should say more the city of Canto Bight. If you're familiar with the newer Hunger Games movies, Canto Bight is kind of like the Las Vegas city that's depicted in one of the movies. I know it's a very controversial storyline. Some people didn't really enjoy that in the movies. Some people did. I didn't honestly have an issue with it. I was okay with it. But even if you had a negative viewpoint of it in the movies, this book doesn't really relate to that. Instead, this book just really takes a look at the city and kind of does 4 short stories that explore individuals that have found themselves in this city. Some that are on the criminal side of the city, some that are like tourists, some that are involved in political intrigue in the city. It's kind of a very interesting look at what life's like in a city in the Star Wars universe from different viewpoints. So kind of think of like, a modern day book coming out and just a collection of short stories about different people who live in Las Vegas and what their life's like. Basically take that same concept, just put it in Star Wars. That's what this book is. It's very interesting. Because it's short stories, I think they were able to kind of do different types of stories that they normally wouldn't do in Star Wars, that wouldn't really get a full novel or definitely not a movie or a TV series, and kind of explore it. So I really enjoyed this. It made me think, with all this new series they're doing for Star Wars and Disney Plus, something like this concept I think would really work really well in a TV series where maybe they picked a planet or a city, and maybe each episode or maybe each season kind of focuses on a different character in that one. Could be an interesting concept, but I really enjoy this one. So if you normally don't read Star Wars books, but you're kind of looking to maybe dip your toe into it, this is a kind of interesting book to start with because it's all short stories. So if you're reading a short story and you're not really into it, you can just stop and skip to the next short story because the plots don't really intertwine that much. They really work as standalone stuff. So it's a way for you to kind of explore the Star Wars fiction world in the book format without having to invest a huge amount of time into reading a full book. So Canto Bight is my number 3rd fiction book that I read in 2020. Number 2 is another prequel. This one to The Pillars of the Earth. It was written by Ken Follett. It's The Evening and the Morning. The Pillars of the Earth is one of my favorite fiction books of all time. Ken Follett is also one of my favorite fiction authors of all time. He is an excellent author in like the historical fiction genre. The Pillars of the Earth is an amazing book. I love it so much. I reread that book probably every 2 or 3 years. I love it so much. So I was very excited to hear that Ken Follett was revisiting this world. And the prequel was very, very interesting. I really enjoyed it. Not quite as much as Pillars of the Earth, but very, very close. Absolutely love it. Basically, this book is set maybe like 100 or 200 years before the events of the Pillars of the Earth, and it's set around the year 1000. And it's kind of exploring kind of the English village and town and the political struggle that's involved in there. It's also set in the time that the Vikings are raiding England, so you have that in the background. You're looking at storylines involving the nobility, commoners, priests, monks, a lot of political intrigue, a lot of interesting writing, a lot of characters. One thing I really love about Ken Follett, he is great at character development. You have a character you've never met before, and within 50 pages you're hugely invested with them. Either you hate them so much because they're an amazing villain, or they're a character you're rooting for because they're the hero of the story, and you're really so invested immediately. One thing I really also enjoy about Ken Follett, even though like I said, he writes historical fiction, like the storylines and the characters are so interesting. You can read these books and really enjoy them and not really be into history. Now, if you're into history, you get like an extra layer of enjoyment. But don't let the historical element scare you away from trying to read Ken Follett. He is such an excellent author that even if you do not care anything about history, I think you'll still enjoy his book. So, The Evening and Morning by Ken Follett is an extra read. I would say you don't have to read The Pillars of the Earth before you read this. I mean, it kind of works as a standalone book. So it's up to you which order you read them in. but I would recommend you just reading Ken Follett in general because he's an amazing author. And then my favorite, my favorite fiction book that I read in 2020 is Thrawn, Ascendancy, Chaos Rising by Timothy Zahn. Timothy Zahn is my favorite Star Wars author. He's one of my favorite sci-fi authors of all time. He is an amazing author. He created the character Grand Admiral Thrawn. Book formats years and years ago, Heir to the Empire, which is another one of my favorite books of all time. Thrawn is my favorite Star Wars character, period. Books, movies, cartoons, whatever. So anytime a new Thrawn book comes out, I'm super excited. Thrawn, Ascendancy, Chaos Rising is my favorite Thrawn book that's been written since Disney took it over. Absolutely love this book. I'm not going to get too much into the plot because if you're not really into Star Wars stuff, a lot of stuff I mentioned the plot just wouldn't make sense to you. But basically, I would explain Thrawn is kind of like the military genius in Star Wars that's not equaled by anybody. Kind of think of like Star Wars version of like Napoleon or Alexander the Great. He's just a fascinating character, and he's a villain, but at the same time he's a villain that a lot of times you can kind of understand their motivation. You find yourself some ways rooting for the villain at some points, even though at some points he's kind of doing some bad stuff at certain aspects of it, but at the same time you realize like, oh, I still want this guy to win because he's so interesting and I kind of understand his viewpoint. So if you're kind of interested in really delving into the world of Star Wars books and you're fully committed, I would strongly encourage you to check out any Star Wars books by Timothy Zahn, be it the old books pre-Disney or the post-Disney books. Thrawn is an amazing character. A lot of people are now interested in him because he was name-dropped in the second season of The Mandalorian, which makes me really hope that we see a live-action version of Thrawn on the screen very, very soon. I absolutely love this book. Timothy Zahn is an amazing writer. Thrawn is an amazing character, and this was an amazing story. So, Thrawn, Ascendancy, Chaos Rising by Timothy Zahn was my favorite fiction book that I read in 2020. In the comment section below, please let me know what were some of the favorite fiction books that you read in 2020. Interested in see what books y'all mentioned. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. Happy reading in 2021, and I'll see you the next time.